On a Monday morning, my son dropped a yellow folder on my kitchen table and said, "Dad, pack your things. Make room for your grandson's family." My wife, 3 months out from spinal surgery, whispered, "This is our home." He ignored her and walked out. When I opened that folder, I found a moving truck reservation, room assignments, and a plan to force us out of the house I'd spent 40 years paying for. What Daniel didn't know was that he had overlooked one detail buried in a filing cabinet, a detail that was about to end everything he thought he'd already won. Some names and details here are shaped for storytelling. The lesson underneath them is not. It was early September, warm enough that I'd left the kitchen window cracked. Margaret was in her armchair, reading glasses on, 3 months out from surgery, and finally sleeping through the night again. I remember thinking things were starting to feel steady. I should have known better. Steady, in my experience, is just the world holding its breath. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, then another, then two more. My son is 48, broad-shouldered, a car salesman, with the kind of confidence that fills a room before he does. Behind him came his wife Vanessa, polished and precise. Then our grandson Ethan, his wife Chloe, and their 2 boys, who started circling the kitchen table like it was a racetrack. Daniel set a yellow folder on the table, flat and deliberate, and pulled out a chair like a man taking a seat at his own desk. "Dad, we need to talk about the house." Margaret's hand went still on her book. "Ethan lost his rental," Daniel said, like he was reporting the weather. "This house has 3 bedrooms. You and Mom only need 1. He'd already found us a place on Birch Avenue, smaller, 1 floor, perfect at this point in your lives." Vanessa chimed in, warm as a sales pitch. They'd already coordinated the movers. We just had to show up. "You're 75, Dad," Daniel said. "This house is too big for 2 people. Make room for your grandson's family. That's what decent people do." Margaret pushed herself up from her chair, the effort costing her more than she'd admit. "Daniel," she said quietly, "this is our home." Something flickered behind his eyes, and he looked past her shoulder like she'd said something inconvenient. Something in me that had stayed quiet and accommodating for 75 years went very still. Not calm, still. The way a room goes still before a storm declares itself. "This house is not available," I told him. "Not for Ethan, not for you, not for anyone we haven't invited in." Daniel's jaw set. "We'll talk when you've had time to think it through." He grabbed his keys and left, Vanessa trailing behind, murmuring about giving us space. Ethan glanced back once, something apologetic in his eyes. Or maybe that's just what I needed to see. He'd left the folder on the table. Nobody forgets the whole point of their visit by accident. That night, after Margaret went to lie down, I sat with it. 40 years came back to me sitting in that armchair, the mattress on the floor when we first moved in, the card table with 3 good legs, Margaret laughing and calling it the beginning of our empire, 11 years on the night shift at the Hartwell warehouse, working Christmases so younger men could stay home. The year we nearly lost the house and Margaret using her aunt's inheritance to save it, money that later led us to our attorney, Gerald Hooper, and a decision we made quietly, the way married people make decisions that matter without asking permission from anyone. I opened the folder. The first page was a U-Haul reservation, booked 8 weeks earlier, delivery address 414 Clover Street, my address. Margaret had still been in the hospital 8 weeks ago. He'd booked a truck to my house before she could even sit up on her own. Next was a handwritten room assignment chart in Vanessa's looping script. Master bedroom, Ethan and Chloe. Margaret's recovery room, kids' playroom. Remove medical equipment first. Like her grab bars and hospital bed were inconveniences to clear before the real tenants moved in. Then screenshots of a group text. 9 people. Planning, moving day. My name wasn't among them. Ethan had written, "Grandpa's place is actually really nice, huge backyard. Not a question, a fact already settled." Daniel's Aunt Patricia had replied that it was so sweet the family was coming together, because nobody in that thread had thought to mention that Harold and Margaret hadn't agreed to any of it. We weren't participants. We were the property being transferred. Every visit these past 2 months, the groceries, the flowers, the "how are you holding up, Dad," hadn't been kindness. It had been reconnaissance. I made myself a quiet promise that night, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. You want to play this like a business transaction, Daniel? Then let's be businesslike. The next morning I drove to Birch Avenue myself, 12 minutes from our house. That's what my son had decided was close enough for his mother. The building was tired brick, no ramp, just 2 worn concrete steps. The manager, Mr. Briggs, told me Daniel had called about the unit 6 weeks earlier, the same week as the U-Haul reservation. Inside, the apartment was small, forgettable, until I reached the bathroom. The door was 28 inches wide. Margaret's wheelchair is 25. It would fit, barely, but there'd be no room to maneuver beside the toilet, no grab bar, no space for anyone to help her. Daniel hadn't made a mistake. A mistake is what you make when you haven't thought something through. He'd measured this, priced it, held it for 6 weeks. He wasn't trying to take care of us. He was trying to move us somewhere we'd be out of the way. Back home, I noticed a key missing from our hook. One of 2 spare front door keys. Gone. Margaret told me, guilt creeping into her voice, that Vanessa had asked for one weeks earlier, in case of an emergency. She thought I'd known. I called Daniel. He admitted Vanessa had it, called it practical. I asked when it was made. A few weeks ago, he said. The same week as the truck, the same week as the apartment hold. I'm planning for the future, Dad, he told me, his voice going flat and rehearsed. Someone in this family has to. That evening I called our neighbor Frank, who'd had a security camera on his porch for years. He had footage from 3 weeks earlier, a Tuesday when I'd taken Margaret to a doctor's appointment. Daniel, Vanessa, and Ethan let themselves into our house with a key and stayed 47 minutes. Ethan came out holding a tape measure. Vanessa was scrolling through photos on her phone. A second clip, 2 weeks later, a stranger in a blazer, walking our property line, taking notes, photographing the house from the sidewalk. Frank printed me a still of his face. I called Gerald that night and told him everything. He asked one question that stopped my heart cold. Did I still have our trust documents? I did. The 1995 trust, amended quietly in 2022. Gerald reminded me what Daniel didn't know. Under the original trust, Daniel was the primary heir. Under the amendment we'd signed together 2 years earlier, without telling a soul, the house would be sold after both our deaths, proceeds going into an education fund for our great-grandchildren. Daniel inherited nothing. He'd spent years planning around an assumption nobody had ever confirmed. But Gerald had something worse to show me. A red folder. A mortgage refinance application from 2021. My name on it. $340,000 against our house. A signature that wasn't mine. The bank had caught the forgery and denied it. A loan officer named Patricia Vance had flagged it and called Gerald as our attorney of record. He'd sat on it too long, hoping it was isolated. It wasn't. Someone had checked the application status online afterward, using my account credentials. Someone had been watching to see if it went through. That same week, Margaret finally told me about an envelope Daniel had left with her in July, while I was at a doctor's appointment. A pre-filled deed transfer. Our house signed over to him. A sticky arrow pointing at her signature line. I just need you to sign, he'd told her. It's not a big deal. She'd asked questions instead, and put the pen down. She hadn't told me, because she couldn't bear to watch my face when she did. Then came a text from Frank, a link to a real estate listing. Our house. Listed with a cash-buy company called Quick Close Realty. $241,000, $46,000 under market. Someone had contacted them, claiming authority to sell. Gerald traced it to an email address tied to Vanessa's business, and the agent who'd walked our yard with a notebook was the same man from Frank's second video. Gerald dug further and found the real engine behind all of it. Daniel was $183,000 in debt, a collapsed crypto margin account, defaulted personal loans, business credit card debt tied to his dealership job, with the largest creditor's deadline 8 weeks out. Selling our house at a lowball price would have cleared it all, with money left over. Ethan's housing crisis hadn't caused any of this. It had been the excuse, the leverage Daniel needed so I couldn't say no. I found our wedding photo missing from above the fireplace, shoved face down in a closet. Vanessa had decided the room needed freshening up. When I confronted Daniel by phone and laid out everything I now knew, he stopped pretending. "Fine, Dad," he said, voice gone cold. "You'd rather hold on to a house than help your own grandson. I told him to go ahead and tell the family, and to make sure they asked about the judgment liens, and about Vanessa's email to quick close. I spent the next week building a folder of my own, new deadbolts on every door, a video doorbell, a part-time caregiver for Margaret, a signed letter from our doctor confirming we were both of sound mind, copies of the trust, Frank's footage, the fraudulent loan application, the fake listing, and a request for a civil standby from the county's Elder Protection Unit for the following Sunday. Daniel texted the night before, "We'll be there at 9 tomorrow, bringing the whole family. Fresh start, Dad." I slept better than I had in 3 weeks. Sunday morning, they came with a U-Haul, Daniel's Aunt Patricia, the whole staged production. Vanessa propped our screen door open with a box before anyone had even knocked. Daniel called from the front walk, all rehearsed warmth. "Come open the door, and we'll figure out the rest together." I picked up the intercom instead. "You said there's a piece of paper that decides who this house belongs to," I told him. "You're right, there is. Your name is not on it." Gerald's car turned onto the street right behind mine, followed by a notary and a county cruiser. Vanessa grabbed the trust summary from Gerald's hands, searching for her name, finding nothing. "You cannot cut your own son out," she said. "The kind who owns his home," Gerald answered, "can do exactly that." Daniel finally broke. "I'm in serious debt, Dad. 2 weeks before the biggest creditor takes action. I just needed the house. Watching my son cry still does something to me that nothing else reaches. You had choices," I told him. "You made them for years. So I'm going to let you face what you built. You're just going to let me go under. That is not the same thing." The cars emptied one by one. Ethan quietly reloaded boxes into the truck, then paused by his car. I told him the deposit offer for his own apartment still stood. Through him, not his father. He nodded and drove off. I went inside, locked the door, and straightened the wedding photo back above the fireplace. "Is it over?" Margaret asked. "It's over, Maggie." 6 weeks later, Daniel had filed for bankruptcy and lost his job over the account irregularities. Ethan found his own apartment. I sent the deposit directly to him, no strings attached. Margaret's recovery kept improving, mornings with her caregiver, evenings at our kitchen table the way we'd shared thousands of them before. One night, Margaret asked if I still loved him. "He's my son," I said. "That's not what I asked," she said. "Yes," I told her. "And loving him never meant handing him a key to something he'd used to hurt you. Those were never the same thing." I tucked the trust summary behind the glass of our wedding photo, invisible unless you knew to look. Daniel had wanted the paper. He never understood the house. If you've spent your life making room for people who treat your generosity as entitlement, hear this from my kitchen table. The deed to your own life already has your name on it. You don't need anyone's permission to act like it does. I don't feel like a man who won something. I feel like a man who finally stopped losing something he should never have been losing in the first place. Don't wait. Don't keep making room for people who've never made room for you. Don't confuse being needed with being loved. A parent's love is not a blank check. You can love your child completely and still refuse to fund their worst instincts. Those two things were never in conflict. They never will be.